My stepfather, Vaughn, snuck his daughter and her entire family into my apartment and, to top it off, tossed my belongings into the garage like they were bags of trash. When I confronted him, he simply shrugged his shoulders and muttered, "She deserves that place more than you do." And the worst part was that my mother, Eleanor, took his side. So, yes, I did it. And we're moving on from here. My name is Elara Thorne, and I'm 25 years old. For the past 6 months, I've been living in a tiny corporate apartment assigned to me by my company in Phoenix, one of those places that serves its purpose but offers no comfort. Everything is functional, white, and cold. A bed, a table, a kitchenette that barely has room to heat anything up. It looks nothing like the spacious 3-bedroom condo I inherited from my father in Seattle. That was a real home. My father died in a plane crash just a year after I finished college. I still remember it perfectly. One day he was texting me about a business trip, casual as could be. The next, his name appeared on the news, on the passenger manifest. I felt a blow to my chest, as if someone had turned off my internal lights. My father always worried about my stability. My parents divorced when I was 13. It wasn't a spectacle of screaming or endless fights. It was just sad. It ended, and that was it. He moved to his condo, and my mother and I stayed in the house. I saw him on weekends. For a couple of years we found a new rhythm, different, but solid. About 2 years after the divorce, my mother met Vaughn. Vaughn wasn't a movie monster. He didn't come home shouting or breaking things. He was worse in a different way, because it felt like his mere presence was enough to slowly occupy the space that used to be mine. He was just there, sitting, giving opinions, making decisions, as if he had always belonged. It wasn't long before my mother married him. Vaughn moved into the house. The following year, when I was 15 turning 16, they had a son, my half-brother, Julian. From then on, the most repeated phrase in my house became, "Elara, can you give me a hand with Julian for a bit? Your stepfather and I are going out." It wasn't, "How was school?" or "How are you feeling?" It was always that. Errands, favors, the new family that had to be upheld. Then there was Brandy, Vaughn's daughter from his first marriage. She's about 10 years older than me. When my mother and Vaughn got together, Brandy was already married and had a baby. She came over often with her husband, Caleb, and the child, and my mother doted on them as if they were guests of honor. There was a special smile, a sweet tone that I almost never heard directed at me. I was 17 when it finally clicked, the realization that I had become something like a piece of furniture in my own home. It happened during a family holiday party, one of those Christmas gatherings where everyone is doing gift exchanges. Brandy arrived with Caleb and the baby. I came home from high school, exhausted, and when I walked into my room, I saw it wasn't my room anymore. My bed wasn't where it always was. My things, my books, my clothes, everything was piled up in the small room my mother used as an office, and my bedroom, the one I'd had my whole life, had a crib set up and a suitcase open on my duvet. My mother was in the hallway, avoiding my eyes. "It's just for the holidays," she said in that voice that meant, "Don't make this a problem for me. Brandy needs the space for the crib." I nodded. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry right then. I just swallowed my anger and said, "Okay." But something shifted inside me, something that never quite settled back into place. When I turned 18, I went away to university. My father paid for everything. My mother and Vaughn didn't contribute a cent. I hardly ever went back. I went at most for my mother's birthday out of obligation. During breaks, my real home was my father's condo, and my refuge was my grandmother, Iris, his mother. My grandmother became my rock. She had a way of being with me that didn't make me feel like a burden. She listened without rushing. She gave me coffee, toast, and that calm that only some older people possess, as if they've seen everything and still leave room for you to feel. When my father died, my grandmother and I grew even closer. I moved full-time into the condo he left me. It was a wide-open space with beautiful light and a scent of someone who loved you lived here. I tried to rebuild something with my mother. I visited her once in a while. I saw Julian, who was growing up curious and restless, with bright eyes, but the reality check remained. Every time Brandy came over with her family, my mother lit up with excitement. By then, Brandy had 2 kids, and guess where they stayed? In my old room, as if that history didn't exist. 6 months ago, I was given a temporary assignment in Phoenix. It was a good opportunity for my career, a high-stakes project that helps you grow. Before I left, my mother offered to help me with my condo. "We can rent it out while you're gone," she told me one day at a cafe, with that voice of a pre-planned scheme. That way you get some extra cash. No thanks, I answered firmly. I don't want strangers living there. My mother pressed her lips together, the way she does when she's holding back a retort. Then she nodded. Fine. Then I'll look after it. I still have the spare key you gave me last year, just in case. I went to Phoenix, and life in the corporate apartment became lonely but manageable. Work, fast food, calls with my grandmother. We talked every week about everything and nothing. The weather, what she cooked, light gossip from the building, how my project was going. Until last Thursday, late at night. That day, my grandmother sounded different. Her voice held something tight, as if she were struggling to say what came next. "Ilara," she said, "I'm not one for gossip, but Mrs. Gable, a lady I play bridge with, lives in your building. She mentioned something that left me uneasy. I felt my stomach knot up. What happened with my condo?" There was a silence, and then my grandmother, slowly, "She says that Brandy and her family moved in shortly after you left, that your mother and Vaughn helped them carry things up." My spine went cold. "That can't be," I said, though a part of me had seen it coming. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," my grandmother said. "I felt you had to know." I hung up and immediately called my mother. I tried to keep my voice light. "Hi, Mum. Just calling to see how you are. Hey, is everything okay with my place?" Yes, she answered too quickly. "Everything's fine. How are you? How's work?" "Good," I said. "Actually, a friend from college needs a place to stay for a few days. I told her she might be able to use my condo. She's going to stop by your place for the key." There, her breathing became noticeable. A small silence, but full of panic. "Oh, Ilara, I don't think that's a good idea," she said. "You always said you didn't want strangers there. Something might get damaged. And you're so careful with your things." "Mom," I cut her off. My voice wasn't soft anymore. "I already know Brandy and her family are living in my condo." The silence was long. That was all the confirmation I needed. "Ilara," she finally blurted out with a tired sigh. "It's true, but they had nowhere to go. Their landlord sold the building and, with how rents are right now—" "You did this behind my back," I interrupted. "You knew I didn't want anyone there." "Brandy isn't anyone," my mother thundered. "She's family. She's Vaughn's daughter." "She's not my family," I said, feeling my hand tremble against the phone. "Don't be childish, Ilara. It's temporary. You aren't even using the place." "I want them out today," I told her, "and I want you to give my spare key to my grandmother." My mother's voice hardened. "Brandy is staying as long as she needs. You don't need it right now." "It's my condo," I snapped. "My father left it to me." "Enough. I have things to do," she said coldly, and hung up. I called back. She didn't answer. I searched for Brandy's number. It went straight to voicemail. I paced my little Phoenix apartment like a caged animal. For 6 months I'd been paying thousands of dollars in HOA fees and utilities for a place I wasn't even in, only to find out my own mother had moved her husband's family in. I grabbed my phone and called my boss. "Gideon, it's Ilara. I need to request a transfer back to the Seattle office. It's a family emergency." Gideon didn't ask too many questions. I had already earned his trust. He said he'd check, and about an hour later, he confirmed. "You're headed back. Fix it. And when you're ready, I'll see you here." The flight back felt eternal. Every minute tightened my anger. I rehearsed conversations in my head, and none ended well. I arrived in Seattle, grabbed my suitcase, and took an Uber straight to my grandmother's house in Queen Anne. When she opened the door, her face lit up, and then it changed because she saw my expression. "Ilara, I didn't think you'd come so fast." She pulled me into a hug. She smelled like lavender and that soft perfume she always wears. It calmed me slightly, though the rage was still stuck there. "I couldn't stay there," I told her. "I need to see what they did to my home." "First, I'm making you tea," she insisted. "You look wrecked." While she was in the kitchen, I messaged Gideon to let him know I was in the city. Then I sat at my grandmother's table and watched her move efficiently, as if the world couldn't knock her down. "Have you talked to my mom since you told me?" I asked. My grandmother shook her head. "No, Eleanor and I, since your father passed, we haven't really gotten along. But yesterday I drove by your building because I was worried after what Mrs. Gable told me. I saw their SUV, and I saw your car." "My car?" I said, nearly choking on my tea. "The one you left in your mother's garage," she confirmed with a serious face. "It was parked outside your building. They're using it." That was when I felt my stomach turn. My condo, my things, my car, all of it as if I didn't exist. I stood up. I'm going right now. I called an Uber and went to the building. It was a beautiful brick conversion, one of those places that used to be a warehouse and now had condos with exposed brick and massive windows. I fell in love with the place the first time my father showed it to me. He told me, "You'll be safe here." Now, standing outside, I felt like a stranger. I went up to the third floor. I walked down the hall to Unit 307, my home. I took a deep breath and knocked hard. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. I could swear I heard movement inside, like footsteps or something being dragged, but they didn't open. I pulled out my keys. I put the key in the lock. It wouldn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. I stood frozen. They had changed the locks. Unbelievable, I whispered to myself. I started knocking again. "I know you're in there. It's my apartment." I waited. Nothing. I left with the anger rising in my throat and ordered another Uber, this time toward my mother and Vaughn's house in Bellevue. It was rush hour, and the drive felt like an eternity, heavy traffic stretching my patience thin. The house looked the same as always. Manicured lawn, trimmed hedges, the swing set Vaughan built for Julian in the backyard. Everything looked perfect from the outside, as if nothing foul was brewing within. I rang the doorbell with more force than necessary. My mother opened it. Her face went from surprise to something hard when she saw me. Behind her appeared Vaughan, arms crossed. "Elara," my mother said flatly, "what are you doing here?" That tone, as if I were an unwelcome guest, shocked me for a second. "What am I doing here?" I repeated. "I live in this city, and I live in a condo that you gave away without my permission." "You should have stayed where you were," my mother replied. "Everything was working here." "Working for who?" I snapped. Vaughan took a step forward. "Brandy and Caleb need that place more than you do," he said, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. "They have kids, Elara. You're just one person. That doesn't make it their apartment," I told him. "It's mine. My father left it to me." "And you left it empty," my mother interjected. "Brandy lost her place. Did you want us to leave them on the street?" "You could have asked me," I answered, "or helped them find something else, or they could have stayed here." Vaughan's face grew heavier. "There isn't room here. Besides, Brandy deserves that place more than you. She has a family to support." I felt my face burn. "And my car?" I asked, remembering what my grandmother said. "The one I left in your garage before I left," Vaughan shrugged. "We gave it to Brandy. Her car broke down, and she needed to get around with the kids." I turned to look at my mother. I searched for something. Regret, doubt, a shred of shame. Nothing. Her face was like a closed door. "Your things from the condo are in the garage," she said, as if she were doing me a favor. "You can take them now. They're in the way." "In the way," I repeated. My voice felt hollow. Like always. My mother tensed slightly but said nothing. "I'm calling a moving truck," I said, taking out my phone. I stood in her entryway, refusing her lukewarm offer to come in for a second. I didn't want to be there. I couldn't be. When the moving van arrived, I directed the crew to the garage. There were my things, boxes piled carelessly, my chair, my nightstand, items tied together with twine as if they had cleared them out fast to make room. "Where to, miss?" the mover asked. I gave him my grandmother's address. While they were loading my things, Julian came home from school. He had his backpack on, his uniform a bit rumpled, and when he saw me, his face lit up. "Elara," he ran toward me, but my mother grabbed his arm. "Go inside and do your homework," she said. "Elara is busy." Julian's face fell. He looked at me with questioning eyes. Then he obeyed and went inside, looking back at me once more before disappearing. When the last box was loaded, I turned to my mother. "And what are you going to do when I get my condo back?" I asked. "Because I am getting it back. Don't cause problems, Elara," she warned quietly. "Brandy has nowhere to go right now." "That isn't my problem," I replied. I climbed into the moving truck. In the passenger seat, as we pulled away, I saw my mother standing in the doorway with that face that says nothing and everything at the same time. At my grandmother's house, we unloaded everything into her garage. The move cost me a few $100s, and every box we took down hurt, like they were tearing away the place that was mine all over again. When the movers left, my grandmother put her arm around my shoulders. "Now what?" she asked softly. I looked at my boxes, my life packed in cardboard. The things my father left me, the memories, all packed away so others could be comfortable. "I'll see tomorrow," I said. "Right now, I need to sleep." That night, lying in my grandmother's guest room, I made a decision. They were certain I was going to do what I always did, swallow my anger, adapt, and stay quiet. Not this time. I got up early. I showered. I had breakfast with my grandmother, and I sat down with my laptop to look up information. Not to play lawyer, but to understand what I could do without getting into a bigger mess. Property, possession, unauthorized entry, vehicle use. My grandmother served me coffee. "What's the plan?" she asked. "I'm filing a report," I said. "They entered my condo without my authorization, and they're using my car." My grandmother nodded seriously. I called to ask about the procedure and was told that the correct path was to go to the sheriff's office to present the case. They also told me something clear. A formal eviction takes time, but they could provide accompaniment to avoid altercations, to document the situation, and to see if the people would voluntarily hand over the keys. I grabbed my ID, digital copies of the condo's title, and the car registration. I kissed my grandmother and left. At the station, I was helped by a deputy named Miller. She wasn't quick to smile, but she had kind eyes. I explained everything. She took notes. "If the property is in your name and there is no lease or authorization from you, it's documented as unauthorized occupation," she told me, choosing her words carefully. "And the car unauthorized use. We'll get it settled." I showed her the documents. She reviewed them, comparing data. "It's clear," she said finally. "We can accompany you today to verify ownership, request voluntary surrender of the property and keys, and prevent this from escalating. If they refuse, the refusal is noted and you proceed through the legal channels. Ready?" I felt for the first time in days that I wasn't alone. "Today?" I asked. "Today," she confirmed. "Give me an hour to coordinate." That hour passed in a blur of calls and bad vending machine coffee. I updated Gideon on what was happening. I told him I was going to fix it and that I'd be ready for work on Monday. As promised, Deputy Miller returned with another officer, Deputy Ross. They told me we'd meet outside my building. I took an Uber since my car was still in Brandy's hands. We met there and went up in the elevator to the 3rd floor together. My heart was racing. Deputy Miller knocked on the door of 307 with authority. "Sheriff's office, please open the door." Long seconds passed. Movement was heard inside. Finally, a man's voice Caleb's asked from behind the door. "What's going on?" "Open the door, please," Deputy Ross said, serious. The door cracked open. Caleb peered out. When he saw me, his eyes went wide. "What the hell, Ilara?" he snapped. "Open the door fully," Deputy Miller instructed. Caleb opened it, and there was Brandy, in my living room, holding one child with another peeking out from behind her legs. My condo, my place, was filled with their things. Toys on the floor, a sofa that wasn't mine, boxes, backpacks, clothes hanging up, and the walls, which used to be a soft gray, were now painted a garish, bright yellow that hit my eyes like a physical blow. "Ilara," Brandy said coldly, "you could have given us a heads up." "A heads up to enter my own apartment?" I countered. "The one you broke into without my permission?" Deputy Miller stepped forward. "Ma'am," she said clearly, "the owner is present and has verified ownership. We are here to document the situation and request the voluntary surrender of the property and keys. This is being recorded." Brandy's face turned red. "My mother gave us permission," she said, pointing at me as if I were the intruder. "We had nowhere to go. We have kids." Deputy Ross spoke calmly. "We understand the situation, but authorization must come from the legal owner. If you refuse to leave, the refusal will be noted and the matter will proceed legally. The most sensible thing is to avoid trouble and leave today." Caleb grit his teeth. "This is ridiculous," he said. "We've been here for months. We even made improvements." "Improvements I didn't ask for," I answered, looking at the yellow walls and my living room turned into a daycare. Deputy Miller maintained her firm tone. "Today we are requesting voluntary surrender. You can take the essentials now. For the rest, we can coordinate a time for removal. But the property is surrendered today. Do we have an agreement?" Brandy opened her mouth as if she couldn't believe it. "And our things?" she demanded. "We aren't going out empty-handed." "Take what you need," Deputy Ross replied. "Clothes, documents, basic necessities. For the rest, a record will be made and an agreement reached. This isn't about a fight, it's about order." Brandy started to cry. The child she was holding grew restless. The other clung to her leg. "We have 2 kids," she said with a cracking voice, looking at me. "Where do you want me to go? How can you do this to family?" Something ignited inside me, but it wasn't blind rage. It was a hard clarity. "Family?" I repeated. "You were never my family, Brandy. You were the person my mother gave everything she took from me. My room, her attention, and now my condo and my car. Enough is enough. Brandy cried harder, as if her pride had been extinguished. You're just as cold as your father was, she spat with malice. My face went cold. Don't you dare speak about my father, I said quietly, but so firmly that even Caleb stayed still for a second. Get your things, and leave my car keys on the table. Caleb took a deep breath, swallowing his anger. He put a hand on Brandy's shoulder. Enough, Jess, he murmured, using her middle name. Let's go to your dad's. We'll figure it out later. I stayed near the entrance while they packed in a frantic rush. Suitcases, clothes, toys, diapers. Brandy threw glares filled with resentment at me between sobs. The deputies stayed there, ensuring there was no damage. About an hour later, they were ready. Brandy passed by me without a word. The children followed, one whimpering, the other silent. Caleb dropped a set of keys on the table with a sharp thud. We fixed a leak in the bathroom and changed some stuff, he said bitterly, trying to get the last word. You're welcome. I didn't answer. Not because I lacked words, but because I didn't want to give them even that. When they left, Deputy Miller asked if I wanted to file a separate report about the car. I thought for a second. Let it be documented, yes, I said. But I don't want this to get any bigger. I just want my life back. They gave me some documents to sign, confirming the voluntary surrender and that the authorities had witnessed the situation. They left. I closed the door, alone, and walked through my condo slowly, as if entering for the first time. I saw the ugly sofa. Things moved around, my kitchen messy, my workspace turned into a nursery. I went into the bathroom and that's where I saw it. On the mirror, written in red lipstick, were two large words, "Bad daughter." I stood there looking at it, seeing my reflection behind the words. If this had happened 6 months ago, I might have started crying right there. I might have felt guilt, but at that moment what I felt was something cold and firm. I grabbed a paper towel, wetted it, and began to wipe away the lipstick. Slowly, without rushing, like someone cleaning a stain they no longer want in their life. When the mirror was clean, I looked out the living room window. Below, I saw Caleb loading suitcases into a car that wasn't mine. My car was parked nearby, and for the first time, I saw it for what it was, another piece of evidence that they had crossed the line. I watched them drive away, and when they disappeared, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The following days were a whirlwind. I called a locksmith and changed the locks. I notified the condo management that only I could authorize entry and that no information or access should be given to anyone else. I ordered a deep cleaning. I arranged for a moving company to bring my things from my grandmother's garage. It hurt to see my furniture out of place. My memories moved as if they meant nothing. The first thing I did was paint. That yellow was screaming at me. I took an entire day to return the walls to a soft gray, the one I liked. I climbed a ladder, roller in hand, and felt that each stroke was reclaiming a little piece of myself. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. My mother called over and over. Vaughn too. And then Brandy. I didn't answer. I had nothing to say. I only answered my grandmother. "They're staying with your mother," she told me on a call. Eleanor called me, absolutely furious. I hung up on her. I don't have the patience for that anymore. "Thank you," I said with the roller still dripping paint. "Truly, thank you." On the third day, while I was arranging books on the shelf, my phone rang again. It was my mother. I didn't want to answer, but something in me, perhaps a desire for closure, pressed the button. "What do you want?" I said bluntly. "How could you do that to your sister?" she exploded, her voice higher than I'd heard it in years. "You left them on the street with children." I took a deep breath. I put the book on the table. First, Brandy is not my sister. Second, I didn't leave anyone on the street. They are with you, which is where they should have been from the start. "But they can't stay here long," my mother said, and for the first time, a hint of real desperation slipped through. "This house isn't big enough for everyone." "Not my problem," I answered. "You should have thought about that before giving away my condo without asking me." My mother clicked her tongue as if I were the one who didn't understand. "You're selfish," she snapped. "Brandy needs that place more than you do." I stayed silent for a second, waiting for her to stop. She didn't. "Besides," she continued, lowering her voice as if it were obvious, "your grandmother is getting older. It won't be long, and when she goes, you'll inherit her house too. You can give your condo to Brandy. You have more than enough." I felt my throat tighten. "Is that what this is?" I asked softly. "You think I have enough, so you decide to distribute what belongs to me?" "Elara, Don't exaggerate, she said quickly. We're talking about family. No, Mom, I told her. We're talking about my property, the property my father left to me, and whatever my grandmother does with her house is her business, not yours. There was a pause, and then my mother changed her tone, as if putting on a friendly mask. Look, Ilara, maybe we just caught each other at a bad time. Why don't you come over for dinner tonight? We can talk about this like adults. Julian misses you. That pulled at me. Julian, the boy who looked for me with those eyes when my mother pulled him away. The boy who wasn't to blame for any of this. But I straightened my posture. The time for talking was before you took my home and my car, I said, and immediately corrected myself to leave no doubt. Before you took my condo and my car. There's nothing left to talk about. My mother stayed silent, and I felt that if I didn't say it at that moment, I would slip back into the old role. I don't want you to call me anymore, I stated. And don't come near my condo. Ilara. It's over, Mom, I said, and it hurt, but I said it. Tell Julian I love him, that when he's older, if he wants to find me, I'll be here. But you, Vaughn and Brandy, you aren't my family anymore. I hung up before she could respond. I blocked her number. I blocked Vaughn's. I blocked Brandy and Caleb. Then I sat on my recovered sofa, in my clean living room, and I cried. Not for them. I cried for myself. For the years I spent trying to earn a place where I was never going to get one. The next morning there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole and was surprised. It was Gideon, my boss. I opened it. Good morning, he said with that calm smile he always wears. I have some documents regarding the office transfer and, honestly, I had a meeting nearby. I wanted to see if you were doing okay. Can I come in? Yes, I answered, still looking confused as to why he was there. I put on some coffee. While it brewed, Gideon walked through the living room. This place is great, he commented. Much better than that unit they gave you down there. A small laugh escaped me. Thanks, it was my father's. We sat down with coffee, and without planning it, I told him everything. The divorce, my mother's second marriage, my father's death, the inheritance, Brandy, the occupied condo, the car, the report, the surrender, the painting, the cut. Gideon listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sat for a second, thinking. Well, he said at last, ready to get back to work? Yes, I replied. I need it. I need the distraction. He nodded. Perfect. You start Monday. There's a project that's going to be perfect for you. After he left, I called my grandmother. Come over for dinner tonight, I told her. I owe you a decent meal. That night we ate in my dining room, which was much more organized now. We talked, and I told her about the call with my mother. I cut ties with her, I said, with a guilt that nagged at me from inside. Sometimes I feel like that makes me a bad person. My grandmother squeezed my hand. It makes you a person with boundaries, she said, and that's something your mother never respected. Your father would understand. I looked down at my plate. It hurts because of Julian, I admitted. He'll grow up, my grandmother said, and he'll understand. And if he doesn't, that will be his decision too. But you can't carry everything your mother chose to do. Months passed. By the time autumn arrived, it had been almost a year since I went to Phoenix and several months since I recovered my home. I threw myself into my work. I kept my condo exactly the way I wanted it, with no trace of them. Every weekend I saw my grandmother. Sometimes we went out for pastries, sometimes we just sat together. I heard through her that Brandy and her family, after staying crammed in with my mother and Vaughn for a few weeks, found an apartment to rent. I didn't feel joy. I felt relief, like when you close a door and the cold air finally stops blowing in. One Saturday morning, in early autumn, I was having breakfast at my usual cafe, the one where they already know me and I don't have to explain anything. I was there with my coffee and a croissant, looking at my phone, when someone sat down across from me without asking permission. I looked up. It was Julian. He had his backpack slung to one side, looking like he'd come from somewhere in a hurry. His eyes were nervous and brave at the same time. "Hi, Ilara," he said carefully. I froze. "Julian, what are you doing here? How did you find me?" He shrugged. "Mom mentioned once that you come here a lot, and I've come every Saturday, for 3 weeks now." I looked at him and my heart clenched. "Does your mom know you're here?" He shook his head. "She thinks I'm at soccer practice." I was going to scold him, I swear. I was going to tell him it wasn't right to lie. But the warmth in my chest from seeing him there, looking for me, won out. "You shouldn't lie to her," I said softly. "But you said when I was older I could find you," he replied, adjusting his backpack. "I'm 10 now. That's older, isn't it? I couldn't help but laugh. Well, yes, I said. I suppose it is. I signaled the waitress. Do you want a hot chocolate? Julian nodded, relieved. We stayed there. He told me about school, his friends, a teacher he liked, a game they had won. He talked and talked, as if he'd been saving everything up to tell me, and listening to him, I felt something inside me start to settle. I didn't need my mother, or Vaughn, or Brandy, but maybe, just maybe, I could still be the big sister to this bright-eyed boy who, despite everything, had come looking for me. When we stood up to leave, Julian looked at me seriously. Can I come next Saturday too? I thought about it for a second, not for him, but for myself, fearing that something might break, but then I saw his face and it came out clearly. Yes, I said. I'll be right here. At the same time, at the same table. Julian smiled as if he'd been given the world. He ran off to catch his bus, turning back once to see me. I stood there for a moment with my coffee already cold, thinking about what family is. Not the one forced on you by obligation, not the one that demands without caring for you, the one you choose, the one you build. Mine might be small, my grandmother Iris, Julian, and me. But it was real, and with that, for the first time in a long time, it was enough.